Hey everyone, thanks for being with me today. You just get me, no guest today. But I wanted to start off by thanking everyone who reached out after last week's episode. I got a lot of fun feedback from people who really liked having another person on this with me. It was fun, I had a great time. So hopefully you enjoyed it. If you haven't listened to it, please do. I had a good friend of mine who's also a therapist on the episode with me, and we had a good time. So, today's episode is related somewhat to last week. So last week we talked about relationship compatibility, and we were talking about intimate relationships, but also relationships just with other, friends, family members. So I was thinking about, the topic of relationships is so detailed. I mean, you could really talk about it for a really, really long time. There's so many different aspects of relationships, different things that make relationships better, different things that make relationships worse. And so over time, I think I'll just kind of sprinkle relationship topics in just to not overdo it all at once. But I was listening to a podcast, a separate podcast, and talking about relationships and how, what we need to do to really nurture relationships. And it really kind of made me think of our topic last week. So we were talking about, when things aren't good, how to recognize that they're not good and how to face the fact that they're not good. And so then, moving on from that is, okay, what do we do to improve that? And again, so many things that we could talk about in terms of how to improve a relationship. But I wanted to just touch on some of that today. And you can really apply this to any kind of relationship. So I'm going to try to see if I can apply it as I'm talking, but we'll see how this works. So let's start with a relationship, an intimate relationship with your significant other, whether it's your spouse, your boyfriend, girlfriend, your whatever person that you are in a long-term or short-term relationship with. It doesn't really matter. It all applies. So when you're in a relationship with someone and it's not going really well, if you recognize that, hey, there are some problems in this relationship, we either aren't on the same page about what we want, or the way we're living our lives just doesn't match up, it can be really discouraging. If you're dating, that can be really, really sad, but ultimately, breaking up might end up being something that you choose to do. You may choose to really work on it and try to stay together because you really want the relationship to last for the future. If you're married, or you've been together long term, maybe you have children, it's really that much more scary to just say, well, you know what, if it's not working, I'm just gonna leave. We're gonna separate, or we're gonna divorce. That's hard. There's a lot at stake, and it's not an easy decision to make either way, but it's a lot harder to make that decision when you have kids or when you're married. And so it's really, really important to focus in on what we can do, because what happens is that a lot of couples get really stuck in the awareness that it's just not good. The relationship is just not good, but it's really hard to know what to do about that. You can say, okay, well, we need to work on our communication, or we need to work on the way that we handle our finances, or we need to talk about our parenting. We're not parenting the same way. But that is a lot to do, and it's a lot to know where to start. And both people have to be equally invested and willing to work on it. And that's not always the case. So what I want you to think about today is how to be an active participant in your relationship. Because what I find is that in some couples that I work with, there's the awareness of the unhappiness is there, and the desire for a different kind of relationship is there, but the action piece of what to do to improve it, that's not always there. And that can be in part because you don't know what to do. It could be because you are the only one wanting to make the effort and the other person isn't wanting to make effort. Well, it's very difficult for one person to change a two-person relationship. And also, sometimes you try to make to make effort and change, and it just doesn't work because it's really hard to do it sometimes without professional help. You just, you're trying to talk to someone who's passionately upset as well as you are, and it's just really hard to get a good conversation or a dialogue that's not confrontational or defensive. So I want you to be an active member of your relationship, or a participating member of your relationship. And what that means is I want you to think about the specific things that exist in your relationship that are a problem. And then I want you to look at it as a problem that needs a solution. So if you were working, if you have a job that requires you to, maybe make a presentation or fix something that's broken or repair a, software, or even just, I don't know, go decorate something, whatever it is that your job is, there's usually a task at hand that requires you to put together some steps to be able to fix it or complete it or resolve it or just maybe take it from start to finish. And so everyone at some point has had to start to fix or change something and take it hopefully to completion, even if it's just a homework assignment. If your teacher hands you a math sheet and says, okay, start working through it, well, you're going to have to slowly and sometimes painfully work through it until it's finished. But what a lot of us do in relationships is that we don't follow through. We don't take it all the way through to the end. And sometimes we quit at the first time, a sign of struggle. If you quit every time something was difficult, you would never accomplish everything. If you were doing that homework assignment and it became difficult and you quit, you'd never finish school. If your kid, if you had an infant and it just was crying at night and you couldn't get your kid to stop crying, well, you're not going to just close the door, walk away, and never look at your child again, or give your kid away because they're crying and you don't know how to make them cry or make them stop. You don't. You suffer through sometimes, but you work at it until you figure it out. And someone else's solution might work for you, so you might ask for advice, but a lot of the times you got to figure it out on your own. You got to find what works for you. But all too often, we walk away or we quit dealing with something that's important. So I want you to think about that for yourself. What are some things that you need to work harder on in your relationship? And these can be bigger relationship issues, like, something that really could be causing you and your partner to be on the brink of a separation. Or it can be really small, like, you just argued about how to pick out the curtains for your new house, whatever. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is that you find that causes some kind of conflict or tension in your relationship, that is what we're addressing today. That is what I want you to think about. It doesn't have to be a major issue. And so the good thing about that is any person listening to this can really apply this to their life. And we'll get to it in a minute, but this can also be applied to non-intimate relationships. It can be applied to personal, friendships or family relationships. But I'll try to kind of tie that in here in a minute. But so for you, that is your personal responsibility. And my hope is that if this is something you feel your current relationship could benefit from, let them listen to this with you. If they are willing to contribute to the improvement of your relationship, I hope that they would, because this is a two-person thing. You cannot on your own make changes that are significant enough to improve your relationship if it needs improvement. You can make quite an impact if you are changing the way that you handle yourself, the way you communicate, your mood, your approach to things. That can have a huge significant improvement effect, but you cannot do it all because it takes two, right? So I want you to think about what are some things maybe that you have kind of dismissed, or where it was a problem and you just didn't have the energy for it, didn't want to work towards it. It was just too much for you to try to tackle with your significant other because you've got all this other stuff over here that requires your attention. You've got your kids that need you, your pets that need you, your job that needs you, the housework needs to be done. So it's just easier to just not talk to your spouse, not deal with the issue that you guys need to deal with. That is something that I really want you to stop and think about. And I want you to think about it for a few reasons. First of all, that's just not a great approach to dealing with a relationship. Sometimes you have to shelf an issue for a little bit and say, you know what, I don't have the bandwidth today, I'm going to deal with it tomorrow. That's fine. As long as you're not doing that all the time, it's okay sometimes to just need to not address something today. If it's not urgent, give it a minute. But it's not a great policy to have kind of implemented all the time where you're just avoiding issues. But it's also not great because what tends to happen in those situations is the conflict happens. You get frustrated, angry, sad, hurt, whatever, and then you kind of put it aside. You don't deal with it, and then naturally, with time, you guys calm down and you just kind of go back to living your life and interacting the way you normally would. And sure enough, that issue stops being an issue because it's just now it's a thing of the past. Neither one of us are upset anymore. We've moved on. And yay, in the moment, that's great that you're fine and happy again. But in reality, the majority of those issues will come back up again. Now, if it's just this little thing that's never gonna, it's not an issue, it's just a one time issue, okay, that's probably fine. But I think you could probably agree, depending on what you've got going on in your mind right now, what example you're thinking of, those issues that you deal with in your relationship are not one-time things. The argument over the kid, the argument over the finances, the argument over, maybe other friends or people in your life, those are typically things that have a deeper issue. So if you're arguing about it or hurt about it or upset about it today, then it's probably going to come back up because it's not resolved. It's not over. You haven't dealt with it. And so it's really important not to sweep those things under the rug because then they compound, they get bigger, they get more, it's just harder to resolve it. And so then it ends up building up to this thing that can lead to what Stacy and I were talking about last week, which is you're just not a good fit anymore. It's not compatible. You have all these issues that aren't resolved, and now you're trying to fix something that is going to be really difficult to fix. And so a lot of relationships can avoid that dead end or that kind of wall if you really try to deal with things as they come up. And if already things have happened in your relationship that you're like, well, what do we do now? All these things have happened. You can still go through each one of those things and resolve them and deal with them. You might be able to do some of that together on your own. Some of that you may need professional help with. You may need a therapist or some kind of mediator that's going to really help you walk through those tough conversations because most likely they're attached to some kind of deeper hurt, and you might start expressing how you feel and the other person might get defensive, and before you know it, it's really not a very good conversation. Nothing productive has come of it, and you're right back where you started or even worse. So couples counseling is really, really difficult because it requires you to listen and let the other person say what they want to say, even if you disagree, even if they're wrong, even if they're forgetting, a really important thing that happened and they're just, oblivious to how you feel, or they, thinking highly of themselves when really they did something awful. Like so many things come up in couples counseling. It's very difficult. And there are a lot of therapists who absolutely refuse to work with couples because of how difficult it is. I love it. I think it's really, it's just a different dynamic that I enjoy, but it is really difficult. So I was joking around with a client the other day about how some couple sessions are great and productive, but most are just like chaos because I don't know. It's like each person really wants to say what they want to say, and they just can't wait to tell their side of the story. And they have all this pent up stuff that they haven't said to each other. So they get to this setting in a counseling session, and it just like word vomit all over the place. And it's hard for a therapist to try to mediate and referee that when you want to I want to give both people an opportunity to speak, but it's really hard when you're interrupting each other. It's really hard when you're not listening, and it's really hard when you're just angry at each other. So if you have one of those relationships where you're not good at listening to each other, you're not good at speaking calmly and respectfully, that is something that you should probably work on. And you might want to work on that individually first and then work on it as a couple, or you might just dive in right as a couple. But a lot of people can work through these things at home without a therapist, where you just practice not interrupting each other. If you're speaking, I need to not be speaking. I need to be listening to you. And I need to try to listen to understand, not just to listen, to wait for my opportunity to get in there and like counteract and argue every point that you made, because then I'm not listening. If I'm doing that, I'm not paying attention, I'm not trying to understand, I'm not trying to hear you. I'm just waiting for my turn to talk, and that is so unhealthy. You don't interrupt your boss at work, you don't interrupt your colleagues, you don't interrupt your teacher. Why is it okay to speak over our significant other and shut them down and make them feel bad about themselves? It's not okay. It's never okay. It doesn't matter what the situation is. But the key is we both need to be working on that. So if I'm in a relationship with someone and I'm really working on being calm, speaking respectfully, using a good tone, a good volume, but the other person is loud and trying to talk over me and trying to make me feel bad about something, well, that's not going to work. So if you kind of maybe think of who you might be in that relationship, are you the person who speaks calmly and tries to calm things down and tries to work towards a resolution? Or are you the person in the relationship that's constantly interrupting and constantly talking over the other person and constantly trying to tell the other person what to do? You might not be either of those people, or you might be another third option. But if you are the person that is part of the problem, you're probably both part of the problem, right? But like if you know that you have certain things in the way that you communicate, interact with your spouse that's really unhealthy, you are responsible for that. I don't care what the other person did to irritate you or make you hurt you. Doesn't matter. You're still responsible for your behavior. If you're hurt or irritated, then you need to say, that really hurts my feelings. I don't want to talk to you anymore. And then you walk away. You don't sit there and start cussing and yelling and telling them how that was hurtful and how mean and disrespectful. Oh, because now you just contributed to the problem. You escalated the problem. And now the other person isn't to blame anymore because you're at fault too. I would rather you exit that situation, tell them how you feel nicely, let them be the loudest person in the room so that no one can turn it around on you and say you did something wrong. And then when the other person calms down, that's going to be something they're going to need to apologize for. But don't do something you're going to have to apologize for later because that doesn't feel good. It just doesn't. So work on the things that you need to work on. Be mindful of the things that you are doing to escalate arguments or escalate conflict or lead to hurt feelings, because again, that piles up and leads to what Stacy and I were talking about last week. And what you don't want is being in a position where you feel trapped and all you want is out of that relationship. It's still possible to work back from it a lot of the times, but not always. And that's the honest truth. I've had to tell couples that I've worked with, I don't think this is going to work. I don't know that you guys are going to be able to stay in a relationship. And it's a really hard thing to have to face. Stacy's had to do that. Every therapist who has worked with couples at some point has had to help their clients think about the possibility that this might not be a good relationship. Because not every relationship is a good relationship. But usually we get to that point when the people in the relationship aren't giving 100%. Sometimes they're giving 100% and it's really just not a good fit and it's best for everyone involved to separate. But most of the time, at least in my personal or professional experience, it's usually because they're not giving 100%. There's, something that they're holding back, or anger they're not able to let go of, or behaviors or habits that they refuse to part from. Well, you can't have a relationship with another person if the thing you're doing is hurting the other person. It doesn't work like that. So let's see. That's kind of the point I want you to filter your thoughts through is, what am I doing to maybe contribute to my relationship being unhealthy or problematic? I don't want you going to your significant other and saying, you know what, I've worked on all this, you need to work on your stuff, it's your turn. No, it's probably not very nice. You can let them listen to this or send them their articles. But at the end of the day, if you feel like you are doing everything in your power and you have to have a conversation with your significant other, it probably needs to go something more like, hey, I've been really trying to make an effort to not say things that are hurtful, to not raise my voice, to not be disrespectful to you, and have you noticed that I don't yell at you anymore? Have you noticed that I don't cuss at you anymore? And hopefully they will have noticed, and then you can say, it's something I'm really making an effort to change, but it doesn't feel the same. When you speak to me, you're still yelling at me, you're still raising your voice at me, and I don't feel at this point like I'm doing anything to really engage with that. So what are you going to do to work on that? Because I know I'm not doing it wrong. I'm not yelling at you. I'm not doing those things to you anymore, but you're still doing that to me. That's much better than, you need to work on your crap. You're still disrespectful to me. You don't even care how I feel. That's just going to make the other person defensive. It's not going to work. So now thinking more day to day, less intense situations. If you are just trying to navigate the day with your significant other, run your household, handle your bills, your children, whatever, I want you to think about, what are the things that you do to be a good partner? Are you a good partner? If I was to ask your partner, would they say, oh yeah, he or she is just so thoughtful, really helpful, we divide all the responsibilities, or even if there's something I do more, he or she is really thankful, appreciative? Are you a good partner? And if you are, if you think you are, if you're confident that you are, I challenge you to ask your significant other, say, am I a good partner to you? And they're probably gonna be like, what are you talking about? Break it down. Do I help? Like, do I do things to truly, divide our responsibilities at home? Do I take responsibility for the kids like you do? Do you feel like I am involved with managing finances? Do you think I'm involved in managing appointments? Like, is there anything that I don't do, or anything that I do that makes you feel like I'm not a good partner? That's a great conversation to have. Be prepared for the answer you might get. And if you are the recipient of that question, please answer kindly. Don't be a jerk. Don't say, no, you're awful, you never help me. Just be like, you know what? Here are some of the things that I think you're really amazing at. I really appreciate that you do this. I feel like we're really partners when it comes to this. But, honestly, when it comes to this, I do more of that. I feel like I really appreciate if you helped me do more of that, or that we helped each other, because it's not my responsibility to do the dishes, whatever. So it's good conversation to have, but then make an effort to really look around your home and figure out what you need to do to be a better partner. Now, every household looks different. Every relationship looks different. If you have if your arrangement is that one person works outside the home and has a job that brings an income, and then another person is at home and takes care of the home, and the job isn't an income generating job, but it's a very important job for the home, you have to decide what that means. And there cannot be resentment about, well, you get to go do this and I'm stuck home, or you get to be home all day and I have to go to work. You're going to have to figure that out, because if you're upset about it, then you're not doing it right. You need to figure out how to do it in a way that leaves you both happy and both satisfied with the arrangement. And when you start to feel resentful or irritated, or just, upset that the other person gets to do something you don't, that is a time to sit down and redefine the relationship, or the expectations, the roles. It might be a time for a change. And you know what? Change isn't always easy. You might not want to go back to work, or you might not want to stay home. But if that ends up being what's best for your health, your home, your family, and it makes you happier in the end, that might be something you need to talk about. Whatever it is, you need to talk about it. And again, you may need a conversation with a therapist to navigate this. But so that is, I kind of brought in a bigger example there, but think of kind of more the daily partnership home stuff. Even if you're, retired, you don't have children, and it's just you and your spouse at home, you may not be used to having each other home all the time. For years, someone went to work, or both of you went to work, and now you're stuck at home together. Be mindful of how you talk to each other. Be mindful of your expectations with each other. Be mindful of how you treat each other. Be partners. Really work on the things that frustrate you. Bring them up. Talk about them kindly. Don't just bury that, because it will build up, and it will lead to where you're unhappy and you feel trapped and you're just snapping at each other all the time, right? So let's shift gears. I want to apply this briefly to more kind of like other relationships. So friendships, family members, it's the same thing. If you are in a relationship with a friend or a family member that's not your spouse, not your significant other, that is really unhealthy for you, it just wears you out, it drains you, you're really not happy, I want you to think about your role in that. What are you doing to contribute to it being better, or what could you do to contribute to it being better? What could you do, or what are you doing that's causing it to be a problem? And if you feel like you're doing all the right things and you're really being a good friend or a good family member and the other person isn't, it's okay to have a conversation with them if they're open to it. Even if you're doing something wrong and you want to sit and talk to them and be like, listen, I think we have an issue. I'm upset with you for this. I think you're upset with me for this. We need to talk this out because I really want to continue to have this relationship. If that goes well, fantastic. And you might now be able to have a better relationship moving on. But if you're doing everything in your power to really be a good friend or family member, and the other person just keeps taking from you or just keeps hurting you, you may have to get to a point where you draw that line. But I do want you to do everything that you can to try to nurture positivity in your actions, to try to do the things that would contribute to a good relationship. And the example that I think of, I don't, if any of you have ever tried to do a Pinterest project or ever watched that show called Nailed It, right? There's always the thing we try to do, always the thing we intend to do, and then there's the result and how it actually comes out. Sometimes it's a masterpiece, it goes exactly the way that we wanted it to go, but most of the time you got trial and error. You got to keep trying. You got to maybe fine tune it or try to make it better along the way. And sometimes it just is a complete fail. But you have to be able to acknowledge that fail and say, you know what? That didn't go the way I wanted to. I didn't say that the way I wanted it to come out. I'm so sorry. That was hurtful to you. Here's what I was trying to say. So even if you give it 100% and you really invest all your energy in trying to be a better member of this relationship, whatever kind of relationship is, there's still the possibility of a struggle, of hurt, of anger, whatever. But if you try, you have a better chance of having a healthy relationship than if you don't try. Because if you don't try, then you're just sitting by letting the years pass and you're just kind of losing out on your life. The other person's losing out on their life, because there are a lot of people stuck in relationships, friendships, family relationships that are just so unhealthy or so unhappy, and people have themselves convinced that this is normal or that this is just how family is, or just how friendship is. It's not. It shouldn't be. And if there will be maybe family members that you have to tolerate, that you don't like, and that you just see them at an event one time a year or whatever, those aren't the people I'm talking about as much. I'm talking about the people that you have a close interaction with. When you're in a relationship with a spouse and you're unhappy and seeing them just drains you, or you don't look forward to coming home from work because they don't bring you a lot of joy, or they're just annoying, or they nag at you, that's a problem. And if you have yourself convinced that that's just how it's going to be, or that's just marriage, you're not right. I'm here to tell you that is not how it's supposed to be. Marriage isn't perfect. You're not always going to be super excited to see your partner or your spouse every single day, but more often than not, you should like them. You should enjoy their company. You should be happy to be around them most of the time. You're going to go through ups and downs. You're going to have times where you want to really just take time apart from each other. But you shouldn't feel like that all the time. You should need, a minute or two space, an hour, go do your own thing. I'm just not going to see you for the rest of the day. But I shouldn't be this, dread of seeing them and dread of spending time with them. And if you're in that place, all I'm telling you is that you have something to work on. I'm not here to make you feel bad about it. I'm not here to tell you should get a divorce at all. I'm telling you there is a problem that you need to work on. And a lot of the time, it's a simple fix. It's Spend time together. Address this issue that you keep avoiding. Handle your finances differently. Talk about this problem you're having with your kid. Change your work schedule, whatever. But some of the time it's deeper, it's heavier, you have to work through it longer. But the alternative is stuck, being unhappy forever. And that's miserable. That's not a way to exist. You married this person for a reason, or you chose to be in a relationship with this person for a reason. You know, try to work on it. Try to make the best out of it. Try to find some joy in it. All right? All right, I put you guys through a lot. Thanks for listening today. If you feel like anyone can benefit from this, please share this with them. Send this to a friend or a family member, and I will see you next time. All right, bye.